Today we're taking an intense look at Disney World prices and price increases. Has it always been this way, and will it affect your upcoming trips? Hey everybody, it's AJ for Disney Food Blog. In today's video, we are prompting a big question, possibly the biggest question of them all when it comes to the Disney parks. What is going on with Disney World's price increases and Profit Palooza lately? Peeps are mad and swearing off going to the parks because of it. So what's the truth behind it, and what can we expect in the future? What we found is actually pretty surprising. Let's get some background. When Magic Kingdom first opened in 1971, a week's worth of park admission, hotel room stays at Disney's Contemporary Resort, meals, airfare, and a recreational addition or two could end up costing one guest a little over $500, which is the equivalent of $3,600 today. But now, a single person doing the exact same type of vacation will spend well over $7,000. And while we expect incremental price increases, we're seeing viral graphs of Disney's ticket prices being raised nearly 4,000% since Magic Kingdom opened. And there are a few recent, seemingly drastic changes in pricing that are sparking a negative sentiment among Disney fans and are providing super bad optics for Disney. So we're going to ask a few questions today. Are these price increases actually abnormal for Disney? Are the price increases outpacing inflation? And if so, is that uncharacteristic for Disney? What are Disney fans actually mad about? And can and will Disney keep increasing prices at this rate? And again, you might be surprised by what we discovered. Here we go. Are these price increases actually abnormal for Disney? Short answer, no, not even a little bit. At least not for the last 20 years. If you look at ticket pricing, which we can because our friends at allears.net have the most comprehensive ticket database online right now, there are three pretty distinct sections to that pricing graph since 1971. Up until the early 1980s, price increases were steady but low. Between 1982 and about 2005, incidentally that's the year Disney Dining Plan started, we see an uptick in the graph, and from 2005 to now, we can see a sharper incline. But these steady increases aren't new, nor are they drastic compared to those over the past 15 plus years. Kevin Yee over at Mice Chat has a really prescient chart created in 2013, which looked at Disney World ticket and hotel price increases between 2003 and 2013, and then extrapolated the predicted prices for 2023, which is super compelling because we're going right into that year now. A one-day ticket in 2003 cost $50. In 2013, $95. Extrapolating the same 90% increase that occurred between 2003 and 2013 to predict next year's price, the ticket would cost $180. A one-day ticket on the Disney World website right now is currently priced at between $109 and $159 per day, although a lot of them are a lot closer to $159 than they are to $109. But it's still actually less than predicted based on the previous 10 years' price increases, and you'd be surprised with several of the hotel predictions in the same article. And the same was true for several of the hotel predictions in the same article. 10 years ago, a 2023 Polynesian resort room was predicted to cost $1,056 based on the 88% increase seen between 2003 and 2013. The actual prices for that 2023 room, they average around $1,000 right now, just a little under what was predicted way back in 2013 using the previous 10 years numbers. So no, the current price increases in baseline vacation costs, tickets, and hotel are not abnormal or out of character. They absolutely keep in line with what we've seen for the past 20 years. And in fact, the increases are happening at the exact same rate as they were happening between 2003 and 2013. So that answers that question. Price increases that are happening right now, pretty much the same as the price increases that have happened every year for the last 20 years. Now, are the price increases outpacing inflation? This is a question people seem to be very, very focused on because it's very visual and visible. And the resounding answer is yes. Since that early 1980s spike, Disney's price increases have always outpaced inflation, and the gap has been widening. But it does bear mentioning you're not paying for the same thing you were paying for in 1971. Disney World's added 3 more parks, countless restaurants, the Disney Springs shopping district, extra security, and lots more infrastructure since 1971. So an apples to apples comparison when it comes to keeping in line with inflation isn't necessarily valid. That said, Disney would likely still be well outpacing inflation on their pricing even with that adjustment, and they have been for nearly 30 years. So if the pricing structure and price increases aren't different than they have been for 30 years, trust me, if you go into the depths of the internet, you will find the exact same "Disney's getting too expensive" arguments on the Disney message boards way back in 2007 that you're seeing now on TikTok. So what's everyone so mad about? And what's the justification? Well, what feels abnormal and what I think is really the root of the price gouging argument right now is the switch from free to paid services en masse. It all came out of nowhere right after the pandemic, right? Magic bands were free. Now they're not. FastPass, Disney's bypass the long queue line service, was free. Now it's not. Magical Express transportation to and from the airport was free for Disney hotel guests. Now it's not. Park tickets have become date-based and surge-priced, with Disney quietly upping the number of days in the higher price tier. And on top of that, we have park hopping restrictions and required park passes, making life not necessarily more expensive for guests, but more annoying for sure, and more restrictive to boot. So we feel like we're getting a much more raw deal for the same ticket price. After all, time is money in Disney World, and limiting my flexibility on property is putting restrictions on my time in certain parks. All right, so that's what I think people are the most upset about, is changing from these free services, free benefits, and making them costly parts of your Disney trip when they never have been before. And then adding extra confusing restrictions on top of all of that. So why are they making so many revenue-based changes right now? Well, let's get a little more background in here. A lot of people don't realize this, but the Disney Parks Experience and Products arm, they call it DPEP, of the Walt Disney Company is really its cash cow. This department historically shores up the rest of the company financially, and it's an area where relatively small changes can make a huge impact in profitability for the company as a whole. DPEP brings in 33% of the company's revenue, but provides 62% of its operating income, which means the profitability of the parks is kind of what makes the company sustainable. So that's possibly why we're seeing so many revenue-based changes in the parks sector specifically. But why is Disney saying these changes are happening? Well, a few reasons. First up, recouping losses from the pandemic, right? We know Disney took a big hit during the pandemic, shutting down their parks and cruise lines worldwide. And since we know that's where a huge chunk of operating income is generated, then we know the hit was bigger than it maybe looked from the outside. According to the Q4 2020 Disney earnings call, the most significant adverse impact in that quarter and year from COVID-19 was approximately $2.4 billion and $6.9 billion, respectively, on operating income at the Parks, Experiences, and Products segment, due to revenue lost as a result of the closures or reduced operating capacities. So they started making changes, and they quickly saw success with those changes. In Q3 of 2022, just a year and a half later, Disney reported revenue increased to $7.4 billion compared to $4.3 billion in the prior year quarter, and segment operating income increased by $1.8 billion over the prior year quarter. I know I'm saying a lot of numbers at you, but just understand that basically they recouped a lot of dollars really fast. And this was due to the Disney parks. In Disney's own words, operating income growth at our domestic parks and experiences was due to higher volumes and increased guest spending. Higher volumes were due to increases in attendance, occupied room nights, and cruise ship sailings, and guest spending growth was due to an increase in average per capita ticket revenue and higher average daily room rates. The increase in average per capita ticket revenue was due to the introduction of Genie Plus and Lightning Lane in the first quarter of the current fiscal year. Higher costs were primarily due to volume growth, cost inflation, and new guest offerings. So, okay, we're doing well on the parks front right now. So that's one big reason for the revenue generating shifts in policy. But how about lining the coffers before a recession? So Bloomberg Economist's probability model has reported a 100% chance of the US going into a recession in the next 12 months. So perhaps the choices being made on cutting free perks and introducing fee-based programs is part of Disney's battening the hatches for a recession that may or may not drag on. So there's two reasons why they may be doing this, but what Disney claims to be the instigator of the changes is supply and demand. Basically, when this many people want to get into the parks, Disney has to do something to regulate the crowds, and according to them, these changes are part of the regulation. Disney's CEO Bob Chapek said during his last earnings call that the changes and price increases guests are seeing directly align with consumer demand. He quotes, "It's all up to the consumer. If consumer demand keeps up, then we act accordingly. And if we see a softening, which we don't think think we're gonna see, then we can act accordingly as well. We're very flexible. So the demand story is a good one, and it's definitely part of the picture. It's no secret that the Disney parks have been inundated by revenge travelers, those people who had trips canceled and postponed by the pandemic since they started loosening the guest capacity reins and pandemic protocols. Disney World used to have reliable downtimes, those seasons when kids were in school and the parks were less packed, but those seasons have all but disappeared in 2021 and 2022. Our first peak at what could be called a downtime since the beginning of 2021 came at the end of August this year and into September, but the crowds have already started picking back up for the holiday season and the 3-day weekends of the fall. So yeah, Disney is definitely seeing much higher demand. That makes sense. But there could be another part to the demand story that Disney's being a little less public about. It's starting to become clear that there are two main types of Disney park goer. The diehard or the super fan. These are the annual pass holders, the families that go once a year or more, DVC members, the Disney adults who move to Orlando to be near their happy place. And then there's the family from Denver, which is the current circulating term coined by CEO Bob Chapek for the families who have never been to Disney World or who travel there once every few years versus on the regular. Now, these two types of Disney goer have different values to Disney's bottom dollar. In a 2020 earnings call, the CEO stated different guests, depending on where they're coming from, have different relative values in terms of their contribution as a guest to the park. And typically, someone who travels and stays for 5 to 7 days is marginally more valuable to the business than someone who comes in on an annual pass and stays a day or two and consumes less merchandise and food and beverage. Makes sense, right? This isn't a new concept. Disney fans who go all the time tend to know the secrets to save money and get as much out of the parks as they can for the lowest possible cost. When your hobby costs this much, you've got to cut a few corners here and there and cut back on expensive meals and high-cost souvenirs and experiences. But when you're visiting for your once-in-a-lifetime adventure, you're more willing to spend big bucks to make those once-in-a-lifetime memories. So it starts to become really clear that the once-in-a-while visitors are going to stay longer and spend more in the parks than the people who go all the time. In 2022, Disney even reported an, quote, unfavorable attendance mix, unquote, at Disneyland Resort, which impacted their financial results for one quarter. While not explicitly stated, the unfavorables in this scenario were widely understood to be annual pass holders. According to Disney execs, it really comes down to a sense of balance. They note that some super fans are annual pass holders and use the parks as their personal playground, quote unquote. And he said they have to make sure there's room in the park for the family from Denver that comes once every 5 years. So on the face of things, Disney is basically saying, hey, we love our annual pass holders, but we want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to experience Disney World. Okay, but as a business, Disney may actually be looking for ways to skew the majority in their favor. And we've got quite a bit of evidence showing that. So the regulations put in place during and after the pandemic give Disney a lot more control over the type of guests they allow in the park. Park passes allow Disney to regulate annual pass holder, hotel guests, and regular park ticket holders separately. There's a different capacity for each of them, so it's up to Disney how many of each type of those guests are allowed into the parks each day. This has actually sparked 2 lawsuits against Disney by annual pass holder groups. And annual pass holder programs have also been paused or severely revamped on both coasts, with perks for pass holders being reduced. It's currently very difficult to buy a top-level annual pass for Disneyland and nearly impossible to buy one for Disney World. Disney guests who aren't Florida residents currently have no way to buy an annual pass at all. And also, let's talk about Genie Plus. Genie Plus, being a paid service, is more of a financial impact on the frequent visitor and annual pass holder who are visiting the parks regularly than it will be on the family from Denver who only has to pay that cost on their infrequent visits. Now, if you think about what that replaced, FastPass, which everyone got for free on every visit, no matter how many times you came. So the annual pass holder is going to bear the brunt of the Genie Plus cost for sure. And these changes could give Disney the tools that it needs to reshape the demographics of the parks. Lower crowds overall, with a higher percentage of high-dollar customers. After all, if demand is so high and supply can't meet that demand, why don't they just build a 5th park? While that is, I'm sure, a very nuanced question, one answer could easily be that they don't just want more guests. They want more of the right guests and fewer of the wrong ones. So this brings us to the question asked in the title of our video. Can they keep up this level of price hike, and will they? Well, price increases will likely continue as they have for the last 20 years. The things Disney has to buy to make the parks run are getting more expensive, and Disney is growing. They're adding new attractions, new hotels, potentially even new lands. But the real question is whether Disney will keep up the changes that make visiting the parks more difficult for the loyal fans. The degrade of value for money as formerly free services become costly additions to a Disney trip, since that's what people are actually upset about, even though those tend to get lumped into a more generic price increases complaint. And the answer is, they probably want to, but can they? Remember the CEO's quote, "If consumer demand keeps up, then we act accordingly. If we see a softening, we can act accordingly as well." The strategy of courting more profitable park guests has been working so far this year based on Disney's earnings calls numbers. So we'll likely see more efforts in the future to smooth the way for first-time and sporadic visitors who are paying more money as we go through the next several years. But I'm very interested in what will happen during this upcoming recession. Will the family from Denver go to Disney World during a recession? Or will this once-in-a-lifetime vacation be one of the first things on the budgetary chopping block? And if their higher value clientele slow their roll, will Disney have to depend on their super fans to keep coming to the parks when the going gets tough? Disney claims they don't see signs of slowing when it comes to park demand, and that means it's likely that their strategy to prioritize the high-value guests will continue as a long-term growth strategy that will pay dividends in coming decades, recession or not. Now, what does that mean for you? And for many of us who are part of that super fan community? Well, there are still ways to save and lots of tips to employ to make sure you get the biggest bang for your buck on a trip to Disney World, whether it's a long weekend staycation or a spring break splurge. Start with a rational, reasonable budget. We got lots of videos here on DFB Guide detailing how much a trip to Disney World costs, so those are easy to check out to get a baseline starting point. Also, look for those discounts. Disney discounts are prevalent if you know where to look. Hotel discounts are consistently offered on Disney World's special offers page, and we'll tell you about every discount we find, food, flights, hotel tickets, etc. over on our newsletter. It's free and you can sign up at the link in the description for this video. And then of course, plan ahead and learn the system. We have dozens of videos here on DFB Guide with tips and suggestions to improve your trip and maximize your budget. So be sure to check those out. Here's a playlist for you. Disney World continues to be a family fun destination for guests from anywhere, and it continues to provide mind-blowing rides, immersive storytelling, and memories that'll last a lifetime. But you don't stay on top for 100 years without savvy business sense. With a perfect storm of demand and inflation and revenge traveling, Disney World prices will likely continue to rise. But if a dream Disney World trip is in your future, stick with us so you can guarantee yourself the best possible vacation and learn all the best tips to make sure you'll never forget it. Thanks for listening, everyone, and thanks for watching. As always, this is AJ for Disney Food Blog, and we'll see you real soon.